There's all hell to pay directly ahead of us. The beast looks as though it's practically on fire. We can see the beast very clearly now.
And all around us is a scene of desolation and death.
War falls neither on the fair nor fortunate.
It is a dreadful sight, one which would sober any person seeing it for the first time.
Its battles are often won by those who lose the least.
38 Marines and 4 and 3 crewmen beside myself.
How many made it off that boat alive?
I'm in. I'm the one. That's it.
For 36 days in 1945, 8 square miles of an island in the Western Pacific was home to a battle without precedent.
Within every 20-foot range, there was a body as far as you could see. So there were hundreds of them.
When you think of 7,000 guys on that little dinky island who lost their lives, that's hard to believe.
He had no arm from the shoulder on. That's gaslight. How he managed to stay there and hold on, I'll never know.
Where one found pride.
Until I was 17, patriotic was not one of my words in my vocabulary. It never occurred to me that I was American because it wasn't treated as such.
Another lost faith.
I hadn't been to a church service in over 65 years.
Our service to Iwo Jima, Japan.
And now a dozen Iwo Jima survivors are headed back to the place where the souls of so many still reside.
And it's going to be emotional. Jimmy Harkrider, Sammy France, Ed Linky, and Jack. And it's not going to be easy. I know that.
Nine News and the Greatest Generations Foundation are on special assignment. 8 square miles. The fight for Iwo.
Iwo Jima is 8 square miles of unadulterated hell.
I didn't think I was get off of this one. I'd gotten off all 3 of the others.
February 19th, 1945 was the day many a teenager grew up very, very quickly on the black, sandy beaches of Iwo Jima. Some never managed to live through the first hour of the attack. Some managed to live a few days. This is a story of a few of the survivors who managed to return to Iwo Jima 67 years later. There are times in one's life when waking up early is neither a chore nor a burden. Escorted by the Patriot Guard, this bus is on its way to nearby Los Angeles International Airport. Inside, there are a dozen men, all well into their 80s. Everyone is anxious to get going.
I was raised by my grandparents.
Jim Bays never knew his parents. At 15, yes, 15, he joined the Navy after convincing a stranger to fake a signature at a recruiting office.
Well, he went down with me,
And he told me he was my father and I'm 17 years old. And they bought it, see?
Some joined because they wanted a job. Others wanted direction. One just wanted out.
I went to the Marine recruiter, and when I talked to him, he said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "I want the longest ride I can get." I'm from Pennsylvania originally. And he said, "Would San Diego be all right?" And I said, "That would just be fine."
All seem to have names indicative of a simpler time. Mike and Jim, Jack and Bruce, David and Joe. Good, short names, American names. They were teenagers when they joined. Decades ago, their moods were captured in black and white portraits that hardly hinted at the brutality that was yet to come. To a man, they will tell you, prior to 1945, they had never heard of a tiny island in the Western Pacific known as Iwo Jima. It was Japanese land, land previously untouched by a foreign invader. Before 1945, the 2x4-mile chunk of black volcanic rock might as well have been the moon. Yet to American military strategists, the importance of Iwo Jima was obvious. If the U.S. could capture the island, its forces would have a place to land and protect heavy bombers headed toward and away from the Japanese mainland. It was as ideal of a spot as any in the Pacific. If the war was going to be won, they figured it was going to have to be won there. Back at LAX, the men with those short American names receive a lengthy American send-off. At an airport this busy never seems to stop, but for a few moments on this day, it does.
What we lay down for this country, what we risk for this country is worth it.
It'll take nearly a day and a half on a pair of flights to get them to the island of Guam. Guam, an island the American military liberated in 1944 during its northern advance toward Japan. It's the first of a number of stops for the men who joined the military during the heart of World War II, men who came from all over the country in search of adventure, in search of meaning, and in search of something deeper than what life had been offering them.
You know, back at that time, of course, the flags were flying and the drums were roaring, and by golly, it was a patriotic thing to be associated, you know, with the military.
For Jim Bays, the once 15-year-old who had once lied in order to become a sailor, this is a trip he insists is well worth waking up early for. Iwo Jima is close.
I tell you, I lost 3 of my shipmates, and I lost the Marine that saved my life.
On a now quiet beach in Guam, he's already thinking of the men who never got this chance.
And it's going to be emotional. Jimmy Harkrider, Sammy France, Ed Linky, and Jack. It's not going to be easy. I know that.
Coming up next.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
6 decades is a long time to wait for a diagnosis.
Kept eating on me like that. And I just said, well, there's something wrong here that's I can't deal with. So I quit.
Long has it been said that time heals all wounds, but on Guam, time has failed to erase all memories of what once happened here. No longer are Marines scrambling up its sand, but hidden in its hills, you can still find layers once occupied by Japanese military commanders.
This bunker was constructed by the Japanese Imperial Navy prior to the battle, so perhaps 42, 43.
Guam's motto these days is, "Where America's day starts." It's a reminder of just how far we are from the mainland. The Ohio State students traveling with us are learning so much more than they would have ever learned from a textbook alone. But there is so much more to learn as we head north to the island of Saipan. As 9 News reporter Dave Delozier shows us, that island has left scars that may never heal.
They were prophetic words from a Japanese admiral who said, "Our war was lost with the loss of Saipan." When U.S. forces captured this island and its airstrip, it put U.S. bombers within range of the Japanese mainland for a nation that pledged to fight to the end. That end was drawing near.
You know, it wasn't this windy when I was here.
This is where Mike Mervosh spent his 21st birthday.
I'll see if I can recognize anything here.
Landing on these beaches, looking for men to kill.
Well, I'll tell you what, 60-some years is still with me. That's what it's like, definitely. I'll never forget it.
The sergeant major they like to call Iron Mike is as tough as the wind that currently angers these seas.
Oh yes, I've seen it all.
Yet no matter how hard he tries, he still can't erase from his mind the images of what he saw happen on Saipan nearly 7 decades ago.
That down there below, nice blue sea. When we got up there, it was a Red Sea. Babies, people floating around in that water.
It is hardly sheer coincidence that these sheer cliffs are known as the Suicide Cliffs.
It was the worst part of the war, as far as I was concerned. I've seen that.
As the Americans advanced north during the summer of 1944, they pushed the natives and the Japanese north as well. What the Americans didn't know was the story the Japanese were advancing among the natives about the Americans.
And if they came here, the women would be raped and enslaved, and the sugar would be roasted and eaten, and the men would be automatically killed. So who wouldn't be scared of that?
Gordon, Marciano's grandparents, told him the native Chamorros and the corner Japanese started to gather near the top of these cliffs. He says the Japanese were the ones who forced the natives to jump to their deaths.
Their spirits are still roaming around. For us locals, we believe that.
One woman jumped in full view of a camera. American Marines say they saw plenty of others jump from the nearby bonsai cliffs into the ocean.
We had the elder people out of this Chamorro tribe trying to talk those families into coming out of those caves.
Nearly 30,000 Japanese died during the battle that raged for 3.5 weeks. More than 3,000 American troops perished.
I always say to them, thank you. Very grateful, and thank you.
Marciano says anyone who had any doubt as to the intentions of the U.S. troops learned quickly they were here to liberate.
We're grateful for what they did. I mean, we're very thankful. Because what if they had not come in?
Maybe it's why an American tank still sits in their waters just off the shoreline. As powerful of a reminder as you will see of a time when a 21-year-old from Pittsburgh said it is time to do some damage.
You know what kind of weather I had here? Hot and sweaty. So getting through it, don't ask me, as a survivor, it's just, we just made it, that's all.
Many of Jim Blaine's early years were spent living inside a piece of bedroom furniture, inside a modest house, inside the city of Peoria, Illinois.
We didn't have a bassinet, so my mother put me in the top drawer of her dresser. So that if I got fussy or started crying, she just shut the drawer.
Many of his latter years were spent trying to keep another drawer shut.
I tell you, you grow up in a hurry.
One that led directly into the thoughts stored deep within his mind.
You don't become a Marine veteran until you see one of your comrades go.
For decades, Blaine refused to tell his story to anyone.
World War II veterans are passing away at the rate of 1,400 per day.
Today, he finds himself telling his story to anyone willing to listen.
I just can't get the thoughts out of my mind of the guys I lost,
We had a squad of 14 men when we left the States in January 1944. 4 major battles we were in. There were only 3 of us left out of that original squad.
Blaine enlisted on March 1st, 1943. When he signed up, he asked for, quote, the quickest way to the battlefield. The Marines assigned him to the 4th Marine Division, 20th Engineer Regiment. A year later, he arrived on the island of Saipan.
Man's inhumanity to man, and somebody can justify that, it's just beyond belief. It's just beyond belief.
The Japanese were ready when the Americans invaded. Evidence of their time spent digging in on the island's hills remain to this day. Blaine says it's a good thing not every one of their actions was recorded in stone.
I saw 2 ladies throwing their babies into the water and then jumping in after them. And the babies continue to float in the surf. Horrible to watch.
On a stormy day at Saipan's Bonsai Cliffs, Blaine sees things the tourists don't see.
I lost my faith in the Lord during the war, and I've never been able to get it back. I always went to Sunday school as a kid. Even went to services in boot camp, in art training. I had pals that I went to Sunday school with, church. On a ship, troop ships, we had services, even on a battlefield. But it got to the point, for me, going to the service, I would always notice that the guys who were there last Sunday, some of them aren't here today. And it kept eating on me like that. And I just said, well, there's something wrong here that I can't deal with. So I quit.
The cost of war is typically calculated in lives and limbs. The cost of war on one's mind is far more difficult to see. Months after Saipan, the military sent the kid from Peoria, Illinois.
I was considered a veteran at the time, obviously.
North to an island unknown to most.
Well, I was 19, I was still 19 then.
Iwo Jima.
I was seasoned war veteran.
On his 13th day of old days on that island, the seasoned war veteran nearly experienced his last day on Earth.
So I engaged him in a firefight, and just in the dark, I emptied my magazine at him, 8 shots, and they were firing back at me, and one of their shells went clear through my foot. And I thought I tripped over a rock as I went down. As I went down, another one bounced off the side of my helmet. Put a hole in it about that big, but it didn't hit me.
A corpsman came to his side, just like so many other corpsmen had done on that island. From there, they made their way to the beach.
Took me down there. There's probably 30 bodies laying there with the ponchos up over their head, waiting to go to the graveyard. We had so many casualties. There were 506 casualties on board the one ship that I was on, and we were just one ship in a 3-ship convoy. I know the number because later on, a couple years ago, I got the log off of the ship. 7 died before we left the harbor.
For decades, he kept so many stories locked up in a drawer slid way back in the corner of his mind. Who he lost, what we lost.
He was a mean bastard. but he had a soft spot. Yeah. All the girls loved him. That's the guy, J.W. we called him.
And then, more than 6 decades after the death of people like J.W. Radley, a doctor finally diagnosed Blaine at the age of 83 with PTSD.
They put me with a therapist, called me a classic case. It's called delayed onset. And to this day, I'm grateful it happened.
So all you young folks have made this giant trip. Well, we're very pleased to have you. Very pleased.
It's why they're here, why he's here.
May I?
You certainly may. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I'm honored, Ranger.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. We think of you every day.
That was on March the 3rd. A bullet went clear through my foot.
Blaine no longer feels the need to keep that drawer shut.
Thank the Lord he survived. Thank the Lord I survived.
The kid who slept in a dresser in a house in Peoria, Illinois figures it's finally time to open up.
For many years I refused to talk about it, but I've been convinced that if you keep it inside, you're just going to be a mess.
Still to come.
Yeah, I was born in a little town called Columbus, Mississippi.
An unlikely route to the shores of Iwo Jima.
I was absolutely fascinated with where I was and what I was doing.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome
Seldom does a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity
our service to Iwo Jima, Japan.
smack of deja vu.
So I'm anxious to see what it looks like. I'm aware that it's not going to look like what it was when I was there.
At least this time, Joseph Lanier knows where he's headed.
During the war, they never told you where you were going. It was destination unknown.
One day a year,
Please wait a minute.
the Japanese government allows Americans onto its tiny, inhospitable island.
Boarding will begin shortly.
What I saw and the places I went, I wasn't even aware that they existed.
It'll be a 2-hour flight from Guam.
All veterans, kindly board on your left-hand side.
That's plenty of time
Welcome aboard.
for Lanier to think about just how far he's already come.
Until I was 17, patriotic was not one of my words in my vocabulary. It never occurred to me that I was American because it wasn't treated as such. I was born in a little town called Columbus, Mississippi. It's about 15 miles west of the Alabama line. We were not treated, for the lack of a better word, as humans.
Inside his Highlands Ranch, Colorado home, Joseph Lanier II will tell you who he is has so very much to do with who he was.
I didn't hate him, I just didn't like the way he raised me.
They shared a name and a small home in a very segregated South, but little else.
We were so poor that I had dropped out of school after my mother died to take care of myself because my father didn't have a job and was taking care of my sisters, and I inadvertently saw the advertisement to join the Navy.
And so the poor, uneducated kid from Mississippi, a grandson of a slave, signed on to see the world, largely unaware of what the world had in store for him when his ship finally left port.
All of a sudden, San Francisco dropped off behind the horizon, and I thought, what the hell happened to San Francisco? I didn't know, I wasn't aware that the world was round.
In early 1945, the war in the Pacific was moving farther away from the United States and closer to Japan. The Americans had already successfully invaded the islands of Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. To the north was an island Japanese military leaders knew was destined to be one of the last lines of their crumbling defense. Yet when the Marines first landed on Iwo's beaches on February 19, 1945, they openly wondered, would there even be a battle?
Well, we thought, what the heck, where are they?
When I hit the beach, there was nothing there. Open country, I thought, boy, this is a piece of cake.
Less than 30 minutes later, Al Utzi's piece of cake turned into a slice of hell. Jim Bays was the one who joined the Navy at the age of 15. In 1945, he was driving an LCVP.
38 Marines and 3 crewmen beside myself.
How many made it off that boat alive?
I'm in. I'm the one. That's it.
The Japanese had spent months creating an underground layer of tunnels within the island. They were ready and they were hidden.
We rarely saw the enemy. All we could do was hear their firing.
Within Al Utzi's company of 250 men, 67 never made it off the island alive. and only 6 of the 250 survived uninjured.
When all that hell broke loose, I looked up in the air. I said, God, please help me. I'll be a good boy for the rest of my life. I did say that.
Within the mind of Joe Lanier, the teenager from Columbus, Mississippi, and grandson of a slave, there is a distinct memory of an order received from an officer.
Don't pick up anything that looks like it's something that you would take home as a souvenir because it might be a booby trap. I remember that as if he told it to us yesterday.
Years later, Lanier found himself wanting to move on with his life.
It wasn't something that I would go to gatherings and say, hey guys, you know, I was in Iwo Jima.
He went on to meet a girl and reconnect with his once distant father.
But he knew that education was our route out of poverty, because that's all he knew.
And in 1952, the man who once thought the world was flat did what once seemed impossible. From a stage at Xavier University, he contemplated his future by catching a quick glimpse into his past.
I turned to the audience to move the tassel, and I looked to my left, and in the middle of that crowd, I saw him and my nephew and nobody else. And I have never seen the pride on a person's face that I saw in my father. And I get choked now when I think of that. That's my son, was what I saw in his face. I've never forgotten it.
So left-hand side first, and we'll switch it around.
So would it surprise anyone to learn that as our plane approaches the island of Iwo Jima,
he could have no vision about how you could get to this place.
Joe Lanier II is thinking about Joe Lanier I.
I'm feeling my father, and I'm thinking about what I would tell him if I could talk to him now.
Iwo Jima literally means Sulphur Island. On its southern end, you will find a volcano named Mount Suribachi. It was from within Suribachi, within a series of caves, where the Japanese unleashed their worst on the Americans landing on the nearby beach.
I'd like to welcome you all to Iwo Jima here.
The last time Lanier walked on this island, he was serving within a segregated unit. In 1945, African Americans were still 3 years away from a presidential order calling for a desegregated military. Yet on this day, he will tell you, it was on this island where a teenager who had never been able to define the word patriotic finally felt a tug.
It is part of the most important thing that has made me become and aware of how fortunate I am to be born in America.
America, all of its men dying on that island, were dying for something bigger than just themselves.
For some reason, America was different. And I was participating in a war that propelled a lot of changes that never even crossed my mind at the time. From this angle, in my mind, I know about where those foxholes were.
And as Lanier spots from the top of Mount Suribachi, the very spot where he spent 2 months of his life, Lanier's twice-in-a-lifetime opportunity has him thinking, if only Dad could see me now.
I would have seen the same expression on his face that I saw in June of 1952 when I graduated from college. My interpretation of that would be, this is a son that I'm proud of.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, yeah.
He was there when the picture was snapped.
And when that flag was going up, we all choked. We really did.
Jack Thurman's second visit to the top of Mount Suribachi.
It is quiet here now, and there was a time when much of the world had little idea that this small island in the South Pacific even existed. But that was before the day that this ground witnessed a defining moment for an entire generation.
I've got a story to tell, and I'm going to tell it.
His is a story of youth and war. Jack Thurman woke up the morning of February 19, 1945, a 19-year-old kid, before long innocence was washed away in a place called Iwo Jima.
We were looking at each other. Then we knew that some of us are not going to make it back.
Jack Thurman in one steel Amtrak landing craft and Jim Bays in another were among the first to go.
We were in pretty good line.
Where they were headed could best be described as straight into hell.
And then the gates opened, the doors opened up, and the first thing I saw right straight in front of me was funnels of water where the Japanese artillery was ripping that ocean apart.
From Mount Suribachi, the Japanese army rained artillery shells on the invasion force long before ever setting foot on Iwo Jima. The end came for far too many.
I got within about 20 yards of the beach and completely.
And that thing was blown completely out of the water. I mean, it just went up in shatters, and I saw bodies flying around, and the rest of the Amtrak came back down into the water along with the other debris. Everything came down at the same time, forming a whirlpool. I saw a pack and a canteen swirling around in that water, and it was all bloody water.
I throw it into the surf. There was fire, and there was stuff, debris and stuff, and I was confused. I was scared.
And I was waiting for somebody to come up, but nobody come up.
I'm in. I'm the one. That's it. Jimmy Hartbrother, Sammy France, and Ed Lincoln, the three of my boys in that boat. He never seen daylight again.
It was ironic that our beach was Red Beach 1, and there was nothing but bloody water on both sides of us.
Death waited too for those who made it onto Iwo Jima. Over the course of the next 36 days, the blood of more than 26,000 Americans was spilled on these 8 square miles.
As each day went by, we began to realize, hey, there's no way we're going to get the hell off of this island.
70,000 Americans landed on the black sand beaches of Iwo Jima. 6,812 never came back. Not just a number when you watch life slip away from a friend.
I got over there to him and knelt down beside him, and I grabbed his right arm and I said, "Help is coming, Tuck, hang in there." I saw his lips move, and there was so much exploding fire I couldn't hear him. And so I leaned down to him like this, and I says, "What is it you're trying to say, Tuck?" And he says, and about that time his arm slipped out of my hands, and he passed on right there.
And every day living and dying came down to who was where and when.
The captain yelled out, "Move out," and we jumped up and we took off. There were 3 shells that landed right in there where we were at. If we hadn't moved out of there within seconds, I wouldn't be here.
There we go.
67 years later, an old footlocker still holds the scars.
Yeah, I did. I wore this on Iwo Jima. And the things I think about is, right away I thought about my buddies.
Jack Thurman was among the first to set foot on Iwo Jima 36 days later. he was among the last to leave.
This is my Bible. I carried this through the whole battle.
And in many ways, these weathered pages carried him through the whole battle.
I did a lot of praying, not only for myself, but for my buddies. Yep.
For all the prayers said in battle, there is still one left to be said.
Good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I didn't know what it was going to be like to set foot on this island 67 years ago.
Well, now you remember.
I'm back. I want to stand there on the beach if I can and look out over the ocean, and I want to say a prayer. Oh, there's the bunker, huh?
And really, when you live through what Jack Thurman lived through, this is all still so clear.
Boy, oh boy.
To the world and to history books, Iwo Jima happened 67 years ago. To Jack Thurman, well, it's like yesterday.
I shot through a number of these holes here. Little slots, you know, for the Japanese to fire out of, and I fired through grenades right back in here.
Few places on this island are more recognizable than this old volcano, Mount Suribachi. It is the high ground the Japanese fiercely defended.
Can't believe I was old. I've been all over that mountain, down inside and everywhere. Doing sniper duty.
Sniper duty. That is exactly what Jack Thurman was doing in the moment that helped define this battle, this war, and in many ways this generation. For you see, he was there, just a few feet away, providing cover for them.
I choked. When I turned and looked over my right shoulder, I was in the rifle. I was in the firing position there on the front line, and I looked up, and like I say, I saw the flag going up, and when that flag was going up, we all choked. Yeah, we really did.
The image captured by Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal inspired a nation to fight on through World War II and became one of the most reproduced photos of all time. But what you might not know is there was another photo taken that day. It came to be known as the gung-ho photo. Faces of young American kids who grew up in the moment. And if you look right there, I bet you can guess who that is.
So Joe let the word out, I want you guys together, and I want another photo of you with the flag. Because you guys should be in this thing. You're the ones that covered the flag raiser.
67 years ago, a 19-year-old kid landed on this beach and became a man. A part of him will always be here, along with the souls of those who remain.
This is their grave, their cemetery, and I can pray.
It is so quiet here. Time will never wash away the memories Jack Thurman has of those 36 days in hell. Here, though, in the quiet and with a prayer, his war is finally over.
Oh, I feel good inside.
Coming up next.
We were fighting for what we thought was the right cause. They did too.
Reconciliation personified.
They were young, just like us.
The enemy, just like me, might have family at home.
And they went to war and fought and died, just like us.
We were fighting for what we thought was the right cause. They did too.
For them, the Japanese army, the line in the sand, fell here on the small island of Iwo Jima. Located just 760 miles from Tokyo, this was their last chance. If this island fell, so would Japan.
I kid you not, you dug a hole and you laid down as far down low as you could with face up.
Smoke and flames cover the entire island.
and you could see the shells going either way. You can actually see the motion of shell.
Marine Corporal David Green knows just how hard the Japanese fought to keep this island. He was among the first Americans to set foot here during the invasion. 36 days later, he would be among the last to leave.
As I'd come on the beach, there's all kinds of people laying around prone position, and to me at that point in time they don't look dead. When I go back to the beach, they're still there, and you realize that all these guys that are laying there have already died.
The casualties, as we hear them, are quite heavy.
Death became a constant reality. 70,000 Americans invaded this island. More than 20,000 Japanese soldiers defended it.
But the thing is, see, when we was there, if you were Japanese and I was American, if you looked at me, we have to kill one another. It's either you kill me or I kill you.
The numbers reflect the cruelty of war. 6,821 Americans made the ultimate sacrifice here. Of the 22,060 Japanese soldiers on this island, only 216 left here alive.
Another burst of flame at the foot of Jima.
Yet for all the hours, days, and weeks of inhumanity, there were also moments of compassion, like when Sergeant Jack Thurman and his men found the body of a Japanese soldier.
Pulled out his billfold, and he come running over to me, and he said, "Hey, look," he says, "I've got a picture of the family." And he said, "I'm going to keep it." I said, "No, you're going to put it back." He said, "Well, may I ask why?" And I said, "Yes, that belongs to him. That's his picture. The family wanted him to have it with him. That's where it belongs."
Unless you've been there, unless you lived through what they lived through, you just don't know. 67 years later, there is still hatred for what happened here.
I have met men even just at the last reunion I was at that would never even think about shaking hands with, entering the same room, listening to a Japanese. They were still Japs. And as far as I'm concerned, they are not still Japs.
Where are you, Keiko?
When David Green's war ended, he went home to Iowa. He took with him the past and the nightmares of 36 days on Iwo Jima and a determination to change the future.
There she is.
In the decades since Green and his wife opened up their home
Hi there, Keiko.
to Japanese exchange students.
Yeah, there's 20 years ago in the book.
On a trip taking David Green back to Iwo Jima, one of his exchange students came back to say thank you.
Mr. Green is so special. His heart is so big.
There was a time on the battlefield when the world was black and white. There was them, and there was us. With time, David Green's world faded to gray.
I sent them a note here, email-wise, and we're in touch all the time. I told them, I was going back to Iwo Jima, and in a sentence, the way that they could do it, they applauded me for going back.
Good morning and welcome.
Time may not heal all wounds. Some are simply too deep. But on the same beach where so many died, so many of them, so many of us, there is now a reunion of honor.
None of us were here because we chose to be here. Our military and civilian leaders put us here. And once we were here, locked in mortal combat, we did what we had to do.
Now, 67 years later, they have come back to do again what must be done, to honor 28,665 lives lost here, Americans and Japanese.
Return to this hollow ground, not as adversaries, but as peace-loving people.
Our flags now fly as our nations stand, side by side.
Good friends now.
Yes, good friends.
History remembers a time when this would not and could not have happened anywhere on these 8 square miles.
To bring enemies together, the word is reconciliation. And that's a very, very good word.
This island that for 36 days stood as a symbol of all that divided us now serves as a reminder of those who fought and died here, just like us.
The same as us. I mean, they were doing their duty and we were doing our duty.
God bless America.
Every day since Iwo Jima, in my life, every day was a bonus.
Stand beside her.
It is a question that was destined to come up the moment they signed up to come here.
Because I landed over there on Green Beach on Mount Suribachi.
Why come back? Why bring back all of those memories?
It's all I can do to keep from choking back. But it's precious for me to be here, really.
From the mountain.
Ralph Whitlock says he always wanted to do this while standing on the shores of Iwo Jima.
White with foam, God bless America.
Al Utzi just wanted the chance to say goodbye.
And one of those machine gunners over there on the cliff was a 17-year-old boy. And he lost his life right over there. So you think like that, you think about that.
Congressman Ed Perlmutter came just to see it and experience it with them.
From the air, it's a tiny island, and we had 50, 60, 70,000 people, men, fighting for this island.
His colleague from Iowa, Congressman Bruce Braley, came to see the spot where his father, an Iwo Jima veteran, once served.
31 years ago today, I buried my dad, and this is the fulfillment of a lifetime mission for me to come back to this island he served on.
Jim Bays, the sailor who signed up for the Navy at the age of 15 with the help of a stranger and a faked signature, will tell you, he came back in order to tell the aunt of a fallen friend what the island is like 67 years later.
She wrote me a letter and wanted to know what happened to Jimmy. It was a hard thing to do, but I wrote a letter to them. And I'm going to also write them another letter when I get back, and I'm going to tell them it's peaceful now. The island is the way we left it.
Sweet home.
Within every 20-foot range, there was a body as far as you could see.
Suribachi was hell.
In no other country in the world could my story be possible.
Long has it been said that on that island uncommon valor was a common virtue, and yet for young men from Mississippi and Texas, Iowa and South Dakota, Pennsylvania and Illinois, so much of what they witnessed was decidedly less than virtuous.
Man's inhumanity to man, and somebody can justify that. It's just beyond belief. It's just beyond belief.
Survivors carry with them not only the burden of remembrance, but the burden of hoping theirs was a life worth living.
It's precious for me to be here, really.
Did I do enough for them?
Every day since Iwo Jima, in my life, every day was a bonus.
Iwo Jima. The name alone resurrects images many have spent decades trying to keep buried. Yet to a man, they will tell you, it is time to talk. Time to reveal. Time to share.
tell you, you grow up in a hurry.
Maybe, just maybe, those of us who listen will learn something not only about the nature of war, but the nature of who we are.
On both sides, we lost young men who had the potential to do so much for their countries.
And in telling that story, maybe, just maybe, they're showing us what it truly means to be virtuous in the first place.
I'm still thinking of the guys who didn't come off.